speak somewhere, just in case.
I think so. It's 7:11. Good time as any. Cool. Welcome everyone to Milton Town Hall, to the Blue Conference Room. I'm Josh Eckhart-Lee. I'm your assistant town planner. And that striped polo is Jack Turner, Junior Environmental Coordinator. David Dayton, he's our lead consultant at Clean Energy Solutions, and Abby Dupre is also on the consultant team. We've been working for the past 3 or so months with Milton Residents for the Elderly in Winter Valley on exploring a microgrid feasibility assessment. We'll get into what that means, but this work is guided by 4 central questions that we're hoping to answer tonight. First of all, why we're doing this at all? What even is a microgrid? What does this project actually mean? What will come out of it? And then what happens after this project is completed? Jack's going to run us through some of the background on environmentally and climatically why this is an important project, and then we'll talk about how it aligns with town goals. So one of the major threats to the power grid, to our power grid, is climate change for a multitude of reasons. Extreme weather, whether it's heat or cold, requires more energy to either cool the house down or heat it up. And that puts a lot of stress on the power grid. In addition to severe storms, physical infrastructure damage as well can interrupt the power grid. And so reliable clean energy is key. So all this stress and potential for damage to the grid is ultimately leads to outages, and emergency services obviously need electricity 24/7 in order to respond to any dangers, as well as just municipal staff needs to operate. Medical devices and other elder care technology also is important to keep running. And additionally, the elder community is a little bit more vulnerable to extreme weather, heat and cold. So it's important that we keep these power grids running. And a major flaw with the current system is that the generators run on fossil fuels, which is contributing to more costs. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. So we entered this work with a couple of key pieces of background information that we've received from the town over the past several years. We entered this work through first a municipal vulnerability preparedness workshop. That was hosted with our partners, environmental partners, a few summers ago, where residents came together over a series of workshops to identify key threats and vulnerabilities that they saw and they were afraid of that would come out of climate change. Issues with extreme heat and power outages were highlighted as one of the key concerns, and residents identified a microgrid as one of the top 3 most important projects to come out of that workshop process. In addition, there are 2 goals in Milton's master plan, which was developed in 2015, that encourage us as your town staff to work towards ensuring sustainability and alternative energy is supported. Particularly, there's an additional goal to support aging in place and making sure that the infrastructure that we have for our aging population is as robust and sophisticated as possible, which is why we partnered with Winter Valley in exploring this potential for a microgrid. Our housing production plan, in addition, also calls for adding energy efficiencies to our housing stock. So those 3 are guiding this work, and that's what we used as a jurisdictional imperative to apply for this grant and do this project. We're not doing this out of the clear blue sky. There are 2 leading communities, Chinatown in the city of Boston, as well as Chelsea, used the same grant that we applied to do their own pilot projects connecting a microgrid to either municipal services, to affordable housing, or to emergency operational or municipal centers. Both of these projects, in addition, were done in partnership with the team at Clean Energy Solutions. So we're really taking the playbook that they developed and running with it. That grant program that they applied to and that we also did was through MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, our regional planning agency, their Accelerating Climate Resiliency grant. We're one of a pretty select crew of recipients in this resilience community. So we're really grateful to have not only received this grant through the program, but another one that we're working on with the Neponset River Watershed Association, looking towards innovative long-term projects like a microgrid that really dually tackle our sort of climate mitigation goals of reducing our emissions through clean energy like solar, as well as promoting resilience and making sure that when there is a grid outage, and it's a when, not an if, at the rate things are going, we can be as resilient and strong as possible. Now, I'm going to turn it over to our experts to answer the question of what even a microgrid is. And then I'll be Abby.
Wow, okay, no pressure. The experts level, but hi everybody. My name is Abby. For everybody who just showed up, I work for Clean Energy Solutions. And I'd love to just take it back a step and answer probably the burning question on your mind, which is what even is a microgrid? The standard definition for a microgrid is this. It's a small network of electricity users. That's Milton, that's the town hall. With a local source of supply, the solar panels, that is usually attached to a centralized national grid, but is able to function independently. The functioning independently part, that's the battery. So what we end up seeing with a microgrid is a system that has those key components, some sort of energy generation, which in this case will be solar, and that's attached to the roof, it's on the lawn, it's somewhere that's local to the load, the building that needs that energy. Then there's also some type of storage component for the battery. And then all of those components are connected to each other and also connected to the grid. And what that means is that the microgrid has two kind of key functions. It's able to generate energy for itself, for the buildings that it's situated within, and also store that energy so that, when the sun maybe isn't shining as much as it needs to, or when, the grid goes down and we need to be pulling energy from somewhere else, we're able to pull energy from the batteries to then keep the lights on and the electricity flowing through that building. But it's also connected to the larger grid so that in a case where maybe, the sun is not shining and the batteries aren't quite stored up enough and we still need to be pulling energy from somewhere else, it still can take power from the grid if necessary. And also it can take power off of the grid, which is its own type of revenue generating proposition there. This is kind of a picture of one sort of just a visual. I wanted to help everybody understand the type of maybe scale we're talking about generally with our components for a microgrid. So you kind of see here the solar panels, they're attached to the grid through this kind of wiring that's happening. And then this is the battery that's on site. And what you would normally see, if you can imagine kind of scaling this up a little bit more, is that you can imagine the town hall is here and one other building is over here, and some of them are wired together and some are wired together virtually. But they're all in conversation with each other to be able to supply power in a way that's now renewable and also more reliable and resilient than would have just been the case if we were relying on grid power. So we talked a little bit then about kind of why a microgrid as opposed to other types of solar, right? Because maybe you see rooftop solar on your neighbor, or you maybe have even heard about community shared solar. But microgrids present their own set of benefits, and they kind of can boil down into these three major categories. There's a local control and personalization component, it's renewable energy, and you get that extra resilience that I was talking about. So what's going on with the local control and personalization? Well, first off, microgrids are able to give a more personal experience because you can decide more where it is that you'd like your energy to come from, and you know where that energy is coming from, right? I don't know about you, but I have no idea where the energy that is for the utility is generated that is powering my home and, well, my home's a boat, but my apartment and maybe your homes and where you live. But when you have a microgrid, you might be able to say, hey, yeah, those solar panels, those are feeding my home right now. Those batteries, that's where my energy is coming from. And there's an element of ownership and control that I think is really important to a microgrid. And same here with this local control and user voice and design, installation and operation. These types of conversations that we're having, the town will be involved as we're developing this microgrid. The people that the microgrid is designed to serve will be involved in the conversation. And that element of energy democracy is really important to us. It's renewable energy, which addresses some of the earlier concerns that were mentioned in terms of what climate change is going to be doing to our energy systems and our need to transition to renewable energy that's more reliable in the wake of climate change. And it's also cheaper than gas. It's cheaper than fossil fuels. So when you install renewable energy, particularly solar energy, as a combination of the energy itself being a little bit cheaper to generate and also some state incentives, you find that it's cheaper overall for consumers. And there's that resilience component that I talked about earlier. You're able to island yourself. So we're able to make sure that as increased pressure is put on the grid, on our systems, our buildings are staying online and providing the vital energy that we need, which you can imagine is especially important for buildings like the police station, which have their 911 response, and also for Winter Valley in particular, with residents who have higher needs for energy. And it's adaptable to future challenges in the sense that the microgrid can expand if it needs to. So we don't have to just stop here. This could be just a beta for where the solar microgrid is serving. And because, again, of that resiliency component, we're able to see into the future, adapt to those future challenges, and do what we need to do to the microgrid to make it serve everybody. So yeah, we're going to turn it now over to Dave to talk a little bit more about kind of how it works. He's the engineer here, so we'll see what he has to say. Thanks, Dave.
Hi, folks. So I should start out by saying I have a personal interest in this. When my wife was ill, we wanted to have in our home a battery and solar panels on the roof, that if the power were ever lost and she were frightened, it would be immediately restored, and she'd have refrigeration and heating and cooling and power and water and phone use and internet without any interruption. And that was very important to me. And so I know how folks here feel. And in addition, we want to address the public safety facilities in town so that they have the same reliability and confidence that no matter what happens, and we know things are going to happen, the power will not be lost. So that's what we're up to. I'll try not to be too boring with this, but a microgrid will generally look like this. There are several buildings, like this one might be, well, this one over here is multifamily housing, apartments and so forth. There's some small businesses. This might be city hall and municipal buildings or other buildings. We'd like to have a way to connect to those even if they're not next to each other. And that's the tricky part, right? So we can't wire between the buildings because we're not a utility. We don't have, it's not allowed to do that unless we stay on the same property. But I won't get into those details. But generally with a microgrid, what we can share is some information through computer links and a network so that each building will have a display that shows where the power is coming from, whether it's on or not, how much is it costing, is anybody in trouble, how do I contact folks, and so forth. And that display will be also kept on no matter what happens with the grid power. So the buildings are all connected through what we call a cloud-based aggregation. By the cloud, we just mean the internet connection. It's a wireless connection. And it does a couple of things. It also, besides letting people listen and see each other and see how it's working, it can make money for the microgrid, because to the electric grid, if I'm a utility, one of the most valuable things I can get is a way to reduce the total load on my utility wires during peak hours, right? And when are peak hours, right? 4 o'clock in the afternoon, people get home and turn on their air conditioning, start cooking. You know, the total generation capacity in New England that we have to build is almost twice what the average use is because of those peaks. So if we can find a way to reduce the power use in the peak hours, it's worth a lot of money to the utility, and they will pay for it. There's all sorts of programs that we can enroll in. So part of the job of our cloud-based controller is to add up these loads, and on a peak hour, we can turn them off from the utility and switch them over to the local battery and solar. And taking a load off the grid is as valuable as adding a generator to the grid if you're the grid operator. So it's worth a lot of money, and that helps pay for what we want to install. So I think that's a general picture. Anybody have a question about that before I go on? Does that make sense so far? Okay.
I saw something about the,
Just
about the police
before you
station.
ask,
Oh, you're going to have to use a microphone.
we're not on Zoom, but it's just
Yeah.
on access.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a crossing guard for the Milton Police. I just quickly read the advertisement for this and came. Does it involve the police station and town hall? Does it involve the hospital, which is close to?
Not yet. The first phase, I have my own mic. I'm all wired up here. The first phase is just the town hall, the police station, and Winter Valley.
Okay, oh, yes.
And then because of this capability of linking other buildings, if the town wants to, then we can bring in the hospital, other housing, churches, other critical facilities who would participate in the microgrid. We have a cute name for that. We call it a microgrid without borders. And it allows us to add buildings anywhere. It's especially valuable in a low-income community. As Josh said, we started working in Chelsea and Chinatown. The people can't be wired together, but we can add buildings anywhere to this kind of microgrid. And we can do it even if the utility doesn't permit us to. We'll be friends with the utility, but we all know it takes them a long time to do anything. So we want to be able to move around without waiting for all of the approvals. Does that make sense?
This is going to happen here soon?
This first phase, our job is just to figure out how it would work, give you a design and pictures and calculations, equipment lists, all the things it would take to make it work. And then the town and Winter Valley will decide whether they want to go and spend the money and make it work. I'll give you a quick preview of that, though. There's enough money now in federal funding programs so that this pretty much will pay for itself. The value that I mentioned of taking the load off the grid is worth a lot. There's a lot of federal grants under the Inflation Reduction Act. There's still a lot of leftover money from the old ARPA and bilateral infrastructure laws that hasn't been spent. So we're pretty sure, I can say I'm positive at least, that this would pay for itself if you decide to go ahead. Yeah. Okay. So, want to give me the next slide?
Actually, I do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So, my name's Sam. I'm just curious, like, for the first stage, do you have like a ballpark range of how many kilowatts this is going to produce in, say, a month or a year?
Yeah, we have, we should know pretty exactly the answer to that question. In fact, there's a slide on it. Let me see if we can move ahead. Let's see. Is it that one? A little farther. Okay, stop there. Yeah, so here we go. The Probably in the buildings at Winter Valley. There will be, if you had 54 kilowatts, does that mean anything to you?
So my understanding is that our average home is like about 5,000 for a year, right?
Yeah, 5
So
kilowatts, right.
always
5,000
kilowatts.
watts, yes.
Trying to
Right.
make sure the digits are
Right.
Okay, perfect. So
Right.
this is like 10
It's
homes
like 10
basically.
times that size. For each of the buildings, the first 4 buildings, their main meters, that is the common space. And then additionally, each unit, as you say, probably uses, I think in an apartment it's closer to 3,000 than 5,000. So if you've got like 30 apartments in one of these buildings and their peak, each one peak is 3, that's like 90 kilowatts, right? But they're not all on at the same time. So the coincident load, we figured, is around 75 kilowatts. So now you've got a building, one of the buildings in Winter Valley that has common space load of about 50 kilowatts, 50,000 watts, and the total apartment coincident load around 75. So that's 125 kilowatts, 125,000 watts of power needed to keep everything on, including all the apartments and all the common space, if we choose to do that. It's a lot of power, but we can do it. We're doing a similar thing in other places. So we probably can cover that load with 2 large battery units that we're using in Cambridge Community Center that would take up like 10 parking spaces, something like that, for a battery, and then some generating capacity on top to cover the entire load if you decide to do that. Yeah.
Just the mic.
My name's Nick. I live in Milton.
Hi.
What you said they're using batteries in Cambridge? What brand batteries? How are they? What are they doing over there? Like, what's their setup? Like, is it Tesla batteries? Or is
it's a really good question, and it's a sensitive one, right?
It is.
Right, because people worry about, there have been stories of fires breaking out with lithium batteries. And
I'm not worried about the fires.
You're not?
No, I'm an electrician. I install them for a living. So I was
great.
just wondering what was being used over there. And
As you know, there are probably 50 manufacturers of
Sure.
batteries these days.
so it's something that's still open to be considered.
Yeah,
Very much.
I
It
mean,
should be.
In the Cambridge Community Center, using a manufacturer called Q Cells.
Okay.
I've stayed away from Tesla. They've been a little unreliable. Their price is really high,
Sure.
and they've taken some units off the market that used to be on the market.
Sure.
Generac is a real possibility. They make a little 18 kilowatt unit, so 3 of them would supply the common loads in one building.
Have you guys considered approaching manufacturers about partnerships, stuff like that? Like, I guess in terms of the utility, have you considered partnerships with the utility? Like, I think it's about the will of the town and maybe the will
Yeah.
of the town to see itself as something of a useful thing that we can do here as a community.
Right.
I think it's tough for people to understand the difference between a physical grid and sort of a virtual grid, because they're different things, but they're complementary.
Right.
But we are talking about different things. In terms of a town, yeah, you have to start by putting a battery somewhere, and you have to have solar panels generating enough solar, and the spot has to be feasible. So
Yeah.
the idea of starting with the police station or the fire department, it's a very commendable thing to do. But I think right now there also needs to be immediately a sense of, well, what's the equity goal in terms of making solar more accessible for Milton residents? Because if we're going to stand up and do something, it should be worth doing and have it be serious. Right now, there's only one microgrid feasibility study being done, I think, with Eversource, and it's in Provincetown. I just think we can do better. We're Milton, Massachusetts. We're
Yeah.
an important place. We could do something here if people were willing to.
I think we can.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. Truly.
No, I get it, guys.
yeah. And we do want to do it with the utility.
But it's scary for people. This is
It is.
talking about electricity.
Yeah.
We're talking about new ways of
Yeah.
talking about electricity. Most people aren't even safe yet with the old ways. So it's a lot, but it's coming one way or another. There's a tremendous amount of money that's poured into the federal government to support this. And we should be proactive about it as a town. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And it's important. It's the right thing to do, you know.
I think so. And I
It's one
think,
of the, like this, the oils come from bad places. The gas comes from bad places. The sun is free. It'll be here once we're gone, and it's
yeah.
easy to use if we choose to. So
Yeah.
that's all. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to see Milton in the lead. Yeah.
I'm all on board with this enthusiasm. I think that there's a lot of excitement that we can grow as a community and stuff. How much of a difference can we make as residents in Milton with our solar?
A lot. You mean by installing it on your own
Right.
home, for
Generating
example?
power and giving that to the grid from the home.
Because we can, if you chose to participate, we could link you into the microgrid, so that your 5,000 watts during peak hours could be switched over to your local solar and battery and removed from the grid, which would be worth a lot to the grid, especially when we add it up to all the other buildings, because now we're talking about megawatts of power. Now we're talking about what people call a virtual power plant, because we've added all those things up and we've got some purchasing power, right, and some bargaining power. So I think each home, each resident who participates adds a lot of power to this and makes Milton a leader in all this. I would say one other thing about the utility before I forget it. If you ask a utility rep in general, how are microgrids doing? As you say, they'll say, oh, we only have one. They don't work in most places. And the reason is they're talking about a conventional microgrid which would string wires from building to building, which is against the law. You can't do that. But this kind of my picture's gone, but in this kind of microgrid, which is really a virtual microgrid, is connected wirelessly by information.
Could I just say that it can start out?
Please say it with the microphone.
Could
Sorry.
I just say that I think it could, and this, granted, folks, this is thinking big I'm talking about, so just bear with me. But it can easily start out as a virtual microgrid, and the best intention should be there to add infrastructure around battery backup. We should make that step as a town. But the idea is that the more people that get solar in the town, and the more expensive it becomes for the utility to provide traditional energy for the town, it's something we did great in this country back in the day. It's called economy of scale. We have to get there. And once 60% of a town, maybe 50% of a town, it's going to be a point where we can become self-determinative with our energy if enough people just get solar. The main thing is about access to solar and solar education and battery storage. It can be done safely. The biggest barriers are the interests that are involved and the fumbling of the utilities and the inability of utilities and companies to work to be proactive, because it's not in their interest to. So there really isn't another good way or place of starting than at the town level if you're going to look at what we need to accomplish for the town. So it has to be done. This is painful. We're sort of talking about inventing something that doesn't exist, but we're good at that. We're Americans, right? So
Yeah. It's a way of reforming the utility from the neighborhood up.
yeah,
It hasn't worked from the regulators down very well.
I like the idea of needing the utility less. I just like that
Yeah,
idea.
sure.
I don't want to put them out of business. I don't want to see
Yeah.
those guys lose jobs. I know those guys. I've
Yeah.
worked with them. But there's just it's really scary to face this stuff, guys. It's really hard. But
Yeah.
you either do it proactively and it's less painful, or you get clobbered in another 20 years or so.
Yeah.
You know, you got to do it. So
We'll stay connected to the utility with every building,
right.
but we're adding a local power source.
And just to say, there are communities like Hingham Light and Power that do have their own local municipal grid. It's not the hardest thing to do. We just don't currently have an infrastructure for that in Milton, but
Right.
you build one if you have the will to build a microgrid. So, you know, we could be one of those towns. And we could also be a town that partners a lot with other towns. The city of Boston's right next to us, you know. So
Yeah,
there's a lot to work with here.
I think you're right.
Anyways, I'm sorry to keep going on and on.
It's great. Thank
So
you.
Oops.
let me just put this.
Oops, sorry, pushing the wrong button here. Yeah, let me just talk about that a minute. I don't want to go through all these slides, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this one because it helps give you a picture, at least my picture. So people will ask, what are the assets that we attach to each building? And because that's what's going to cost money. So we start out with solar panels. We always start with energy efficiency. So the more we can increase the efficiency of each building, that is, can it do what it's supposed to do with less electricity? The more we can do with that, the better. At Winter Valley, we found you've already done almost everything we could think of. It's a couple of exceptions that we can talk about. But then the next thing is we figure out how much solar we can fit on the building. Whereas in a home, you can easily put enough solar panels on the roof to power that home. On an apartment building or a building like Winter Valley or even a town hall, there isn't enough room on the roof for enough solar panels to power the whole building. So the next thing we do is figure out the maximum amount of solar on the roof. And then we can put some additional solar in fields and in parking lots under canopies and things like that. So that's the second thing we do. And the third thing we would do is, to the extent that these batteries will not carry the load of the building for a long outage, and usually they'll carry it for several hours. If the sun keeps shining and people aren't using too much energy, they can go indefinitely. But there's always a possibility that the batteries will be totally drained, it gets cloudy out, there's not enough solar energy. So we want some backup generation. So we'll put in some backup generating, and I call it biofueled. As much as possible, we don't want to use fossil fuels. So you can use biodiesel or perhaps methane that is derived from landfills, something like that, to power these generators. And then two other things we haven't talked about. Oh, and the batteries we've talked about, they're down here. It's important for folks to have not only their power, but their communication, so they can be in touch with loved ones and emergency services and each other. So we're thinking of a satellite hotspot, which would allow cell phones to continue use and continued interconnection with the internet. So we talk about satellite hotspots. And the last thing is we've got some two-way electric vehicle charging units pictured on the side of the building. We'd like to consider that. Increasingly, people will be using electric vehicles, right? And we need charging stations they can count on. And we want them to be as resilient as all the other power use. There's another trick here too, which is they're two-way. So if you picture a municipal facility with, say, fire trucks, school buses, large municipal trucks, they're sitting there most of the time. They're not moving all the time. So what are they? They're big batteries. And if we plug them in, we can use that battery capacity to augment the batteries we install when those vehicles aren't moving. And then when they are moving, they've got an electric vehicle will beat a gas vehicle any day. In North Carolina, we did some drag races between school buses, an electric school bus versus a gas school bus. No problem, we always won. So So the EV charging is another possibility. So those are the things we're going to put in. I think I'll stop there. I've got some slides on the feasibility study and proving, what we did in Chelsea and Chinatown. But let me stop there and ask for other questions. And then Josh can maybe, there's some other slides that he wants to cover too.
Any other follow-up questions on the mechanics? Great. We'll just talk about what's... Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
Hi. Hello. We're new to electric bicycles. My husband just got one. He's riding it into Boston instead of driving.
Good for him.
Yes. If we lost power, then what?
Then,
With an electric bike.
right, you need to charge it.
Place to go to
Absolutely, absolutely. We'd plug that electric bike into the electric.
Cars are?
It can be plugged in anywhere because it uses normal grid power to charge it normally, right? So the batteries will pick up that load, and you'd have the same access to power for charging the bikes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep that bike going.
Oh, thanks.
I'm not so
thinking
sure
of
I
getting
like
one
him
too.
driving it to riding.
I
it to
know. I
Boston.
pray every day. And give him the bright vest too.
Right.
He's careful.
Yeah. Okay.
Our planning
Like the
director
crossing
takes
guard
his
coming
e-bike
out. There you
from
go.
Dorchester to town hall every day. Just going to leave it here for ease. So I'm just going to quickly walk folks through what this project specifically looks at. We've sort of talked around it, but we have 3 sites that the team is doing an in-depth assessment of how we use energy, what sort of potential there is at these sites to increase our solar potential, where could potential batteries be stored. And that's where you're sitting now, Town Hall, the Milton Police Station on Highland Street, and then Winter Valley. We picked these for quite obvious reasons that we've talked earlier. Emergency services are one of the most critical sort of things to maintain in the case of a grid outage in these extreme weather events. And while existing generators are present at the police station, don't worry, if the grid goes out, the police station is still functioning. It functions as basically as dirtily as possible. And this way we can switch over to a greener, safer way of maintaining power. Similarly at Town Hall, when there's a number of connected information systems in Town Hall that function throughout town. For our police station, internet, for instance, is run out of Town Hall, fire stations. All of our services need that central Town Hall hub. And then senior affordable housing at Winter Valley. This project was somewhat born out of a call we received from a resident at Winter Valley saying that their utility bill was too high and what could we do about it. This is kind of way down in the rabbit hole as a response to that ask, but we really want to make sure that this project first and foremost addresses what is a environmental justice community according to the state, and great, wonderful neighbors, project partners. So that's what we're looking at now, but there's certainly opportunity to extend to the hospital, to the library, honestly, even the high school, if it comes to that. There's these 4 stages of the project scope, that audit that David and his team did to see how we're currently using energy, the assessment of how we can sort of generate more power, and then this final analysis of what it would look like to install a microgrid system in Milton. The 4th part are these community meetings. There'll be 3 of them. This is the first one, our sort of introductory informational one. We'll host another one at Winter Valley, specifically for residents to really walk through exactly what this might mean there. And then we'll have a 3rd one as the feasibility analysis is coming out to have folks collaboratively engage and provide edits and feedbacks before we get that final feedback analysis. It's exactly what I just said, that audit. They have come on site. We've met with engineers, with Consolidated Facilities, DPW. So we're really trying to make sure we have as much information as possible. As David said, would you like to expand a little bit more on the Winter Valley energy audit, actually? Or
No, I've said what I can. It starts out being very energy efficient. So we want to do the solar and the resilience and the internet and so forth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
that's the load assessment. Somebody asks, what are the loads, and that summarizes some of those. We can, we should have done this before, but we can make copies of this for people to take with them. Then you have a chance to.
Yeah. We'll share this out on the town website afterwards. And so these are our 3 community meetings. And then what happens out of this, as David said, we're working on this sort of broad timeline. We're about at the 4th month, a little bit late on this community meeting from what we expected. But that was not super surprising, as it took a while to get all of our energy usage data from the police station, from Eversource. We're moving into these next few assessments and feasibility work. And this project is funded out for a year. This first third of the year has gone by, and we're excited to get into these next 2 phases. We're expecting community meeting 2 to be instead of 1 to 2 months, 2 to 3 months, so early autumn. And then that final meeting will probably be around early in the new year. We have done some preliminary contacts with our folks over at Eversource, our account manager, and they'll be meeting with the consultant team, with David, as well as myself and Jack, to talk about how we can potentially partner more with Eversource and work collaboratively and not competitively. Sure. Yeah. There'll be additional discussions on some heat pump trade-offs. The feasibility study itself will be drafted and then be made available for review. And then we'll have these follow-up community meetings. As David said, and which is hopefully reassuring, this project doesn't end with a brand new energy system that's foisted upon the community. It ends with a roadmap for how we can get there, and that's hopefully designed collaboratively. We only have, I say only, it's $50,000 is what we were awarded as a grant. That takes us through the completion of a report and through these completion of the community meetings. The next step is a much, much larger capital project to build this infrastructure. But this is really the first and for me, one of the most essential steps so that we can plan it right and then follow through. Now it's an open Q&A. We've been kind of doing that live, which is wonderful due to the scale of this meeting. I'm really grateful for it. But any other questions, comments, thoughts, ideas? Please.
Okay. My name is Margaret. How does it get passed? Is it the people of the town or the select people, or what makes it get passed or not?
So it would be a multi-stage process, certainly deeply involving the select board. It would likely have to be in part through our capital improvement fund, which is a fund managed by our select board. And there's a capital improvements committee as well. So it would be a multi-board, multi-committee process that would likely then end up at town meeting. So those are the sort of checks and balances, if you like, for whose jurisdiction it would be a part of. Obviously, the board at Winter Valley is essential. They were brought in early to this process. We talked and presented to them. They are an active partner in the project. But then it would be finally up to the select board to advance it.
Okay, so it's the select board and their areas of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the capital improvements committee would likely be it. There's a climate action planning committee who will be quite closely involved, but they've only had one meeting so far. They have their next meeting this Thursday, the 20th, if you want to join. It's a public meeting, so anyone can attend.
You know, I'm not too clear on a lot of these.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I don't mean what you're saying. I'm not anyway. But supposing like there were a lot of people not for this, then what happens? Like, I mean, how does that get, is it to the selectmen and it gets to the,
To town meeting?
yeah.
Yeah, it would be in some way through the select board. And, you know, those are your elected officials.
Yeah.
And so if there was an outcry against this, people are really diehards for Eversource, real fanboys, then the select board would hear about it. They are really responsive
Oh, I
to those
see.
kind of
Yeah,
concerns.
that's what I was thinking, but I wasn't sure.
Of course. And if the board at Winter Valley found some key issues in the feasibility report that meant that this wasn't an interest for them moving forward, that would also stop it, at least at that site.
Yeah. I understood when you said about the people, you know, so much of the people. I'm like, well, is that going to come to a vote? You know, one of the questions or something?
It would
or-
likely at some point come to a vote at town meeting. Since there's a budgetary element to it, it would probably also go through the warrant committee. So by the end of this, it'll be likely a multi-year process going through a bunch of different committee
So it's
stands.
important that to kind of spread the word that
Yeah.
this might be a good thing.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I fully believe it is a good thing.
You answered my question. I just
Okay.
wasn't sure how it was going to.
Yeah. Please, yeah.
So I just have to say I'm also fully on board with this idea. I mean, it's very similar to what I do for work. We're just doing it for residents. And I mean, the idea that we can become more independent and just protect our community is better. So 54 kilowatts, right, for our stage one, that's the equivalent of 11 homes. So whether or not this passes, I mean, we as residents of Milton can do something about this. And, you know, even if worst case scenario, there is an outcry, and I honestly would be surprised if there was, because honestly, to me, this seems like a no-brainer. But even if there was, there are things that we individually can do, because 11 homes would be enough to produce that same amount of power to the grid. And kind of as mentioned before, what was your name again? Nick. As Nick wonderfully said before, going solar is easier now than ever. There's actually ways where you can get solar without any cost of switching, and you're just lowering your electric bill. There are ways where if you're moving soon, that can be arranged to be as smooth as possible without any loans or anything. It's a matter of education. And if we really want to make a difference, it's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And I'll say that Milton was recently designated a Soul Smart Bronze community. Soul Smart is a program run by the federal Department of Energy, where they provided us with free technical assistance on how we can encourage solar to be generated in town. As part of that, our inspectional services, if you've ever gone to get a building permit, their webpage has a dedicated sort of solar permitting checklist. So if you're looking to build solar on your home, it'll tell you exactly what it takes, how much it costs, and what that process looks like. So it demystifies it a little. As well as they did a full comprehensive review of our town zoning code to see what opportunities there are to make sure that the sort of legal underpinnings of how we use our land are supportive of solar. So we're doing a lot of things to try and encourage that. There's a whole energy and conservation initiatives webpage on the town's DPW department site as well. So trying to put it in some places. I know townofmilton.org is not a highly trafficked website, or Facebook, but we're trying to get the information out as we can, but always, ambassadorship from neighbors. The trust that you guys have and can share in your community means so much to the way we have successful projects. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm trying to understand this too. I don't know much about solar. We just got a new roof. We live in Milton, single family home, and electricity is so expensive.
And getting more so every year.
And is this going to help us or hurt us as far as money goes, because we're getting older, and just want to know what to do about this?
Yeah. Solar on your home will very likely help alleviate some of those costs. It may cost some amount to install. I'm not going to plug Sam's company, but he can tell you about it. Sam, yeah?
Oh yeah, Sam.
This is an opportunity to lower your costs. One other way to potentially do that is engaging with Milton's community electricity aggregation program, miltoncea.com. That's a community choice aggregation program.
We have that? Okay.
Yes. 2/3 of the homes in Milton are enrolled in that program. So it's very well used. And while, caveat, future savings cannot be guaranteed, it's currently quite a bit cheaper than the basic Eversource rate. I don't know exactly the numbers off the top of my head, but it can save you.
I could probably find out through Eversource.
And through miltoncea.com, it'll tell you exactly what the Eversource rate and how that compares to both the Milton Basic program and the Milton Green 100 program.
Right.
Which is
I'll talk to my husband about everything from here tonight. Thanks.
Yeah, check out or re-review the MATV video, or call us.
I do just want to be super clear, though, that it definitely won't raise your energy. This project will not raise your energy costs like at all. You said, will it hurt or will it harm? It won't do any harm. I think all it does is set the stage for future benefit, right? Because it's a microgrid without border, it could expand to your house. It could expand to anybody's house. The possibilities are sort of limitless if we're able to take this first step. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Thank you.
but in terms of solar savings, there are definitely some. It's about 5 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour or so. So, $40, maybe $50. It's super going to depend off your energy bill per month, but everything helps because everything's going up. Yeah.
Just got to have the talking stick.
Yeah. The electric talking stick.
My dad's kind of a good example. He has solar on his house. He lives in Randolph. He used to live in Milton, but he moved to Randolph, and he has 18 panels on his house. It's just a ranch house, and just based on the solar he's produced this summer and spring, he has a $600 to $800 credit waiting for him in the fall when he starts to use, when he's not producing as much solar. So in terms of it being something that you choose to do it, it's done, it does start benefiting you immediately, So and good for my dad because he's a good case study,
And then just more on how it helps you immediately. There are places that will do it. I mean, not to brag, our company does. We cut some people's bills in half. So we're usually seeing people going down to 20 cents a kilowatt hour, which is better than, I think Massachusetts average is 41, right? So it really depends on the area, of course, and other factors, but that's all happening right off the bat. And then those companies, including ours, do tend to lock in people's rates because we understand Eversource and many other companies, they have to raise the rates. They don't really have a choice. But if you want to get out of it, now's the chance. There's Southwest Airlines did something similar with their fuel where they got a hedge fund. So they got their fuel at a guaranteed rate beforehand. And then when the oil crisis hit, I think it was 2000, and then there was a recession in 2008. I don't know the exact dates, but there were a lot of economic issues with the oil and with OPEC and things like that. But Southwest crushed their competition at that time just because they had the cheaper rates and they were locked in, kind of like how Milton has, I forgot the exact name of the program, but we're locked in with our supplier.
CEA. Milton CEA. .com will take you there. It's the community electricity aggregation.
Right.
One more thing.
Please.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
It's more an observation because this looks very promising to me, even though I don't know much about what we're talking about, but I'm getting to understand it. But what I liked was the future. Mm-hmm. People talk about today, but we need to talk about the future. And it's probably sold me. I don't mean, you know what I mean? I don't mean it on that your presentation isn't, but the future is going to be so different. And you have to be a little prepared. And also, it sounds like it's American made. Is that right? Or other places already have it? I don't know. This grid. But it sounds like it's our idea. And I'm all for the future.
Yeah, no, as climate change inevitably becomes more impactful, particularly to Miltonians, in how it has, July 4th and 5th, the two hottest days of the year, and those will be the two coolest July 4ths that we'll have for the next 20 years. Those pressures are going to become a lot more real and a lot more present. And if we can build this system now, before we're having regular blackouts, like I was in California before I moved out here, we had regular blackouts and brownouts that could have been mitigated and were in some communities mitigated by having these local generation projects. So this is very much going to build out resilience as we move forward. Great. If there are no questions, comments, concerns, I'm sorry. That's the end of our presentation. There's so much pizza. Please take a slice for your husband at least. We will try and share out these slides as we can tomorrow morning, and MATV will have the recording up on their YouTube channel. No. It's a Tuesday night and you've come to the basement of Town Hall. You guys are the ones who really deserve applause, truly. So it means a lot that you came.
I'm going to have a piece of pizza.
Please, please.